Hey, I'm Sam. Welcome to Brickwall Pictures. Today I'm going to be doing a single elimination bracketed tournament to crown the best war film ever made. 64 war movies enter, only one will be crowned the ultimate war film. Feel free to play along with this tournament and let me know down in the comments which decisions you would have made differently, because I'm sure we're going to disagree on some of these. It'd be pretty weird. It'd be kind of suspicious if we agreed on every movie, don't you think? There are 64 movies in here because there are 64 slots available. I'm just putting every war movie in here. I'm not only nominating the good war movies, there might be some in here that I don't particularly care for. This is a broad look at the war genre overall to get a kind of a realistic look at the genre as a whole. These are in a randomized order, and just to ensure that I'm tapping the randomize button repeatedly right now, and I'm not even looking, I'm just going to stop clicking at a certain point, and that will be our matchup for the tournament. For our first matchup is Barry Lyndon versus Three Kings. This is an exceptionally easy one. Barry Lyndon is a pretty unique entry in this because it's looking at a war that is not touched on by any of the other movies in this bracket. So it's got that little X factor to it, but also it's just a phenomenal movie. Three Kings, on the other hand, is a pretty popular movie. I don't like it all that much. I really dislike David O. Russell as a filmmaker. I haven't liked any of his movies, and his movies are all very highly acclaimed. People finally seem to be getting on my wavelength with his newest movie, Amsterdam, which I'm not going to see. This is an exceptionally easy matchup. Barry Lyndon wins. Okay, next up we have Saving Private Ryan versus The Admiral Roaring Currents. If you haven't heard of The Admiral, it is a South Korean film. I think it's actually a two-parter. I only watched the first one, though, because I didn't like it all that much. Saving Private Ryan is moving on. Okay, Wolf Warrior versus Tropic Thunder. This is a weird one. So Tropic Thunder, obviously a parody movie. It's a parody of Vietnam War movies. It's like a fake war even within the movie, you know. Wolf Warrior, on the other hand, is I would call it a martial arts movie, but it is a war movie. It's like military action and also martial arts. Wolf Warrior is kind of enjoyable. I don't like the sequel and what the sequel meant for the Chinese action film industry moving forward. I think it's kind of problematic in that way. It's very Americanized. It's not as much of a problem in the first movie, though it does have plenty of issues. Honestly, I think I might actually go Tropic Thunder on this one because Wolf Warrior isn't great. It does have a couple of good action sequences, though. There's a really fun Jing Woo versus Scott Adkins fight, which is a standout of that movie. Not a great movie, though. Very nationalistic in kind of a gross way as well. The Patriot versus MASH. I don't love either of these movies. The Patriot has kind of the Barry Lyndon X factor because it's looking at the Revolutionary War, which is not nearly as touched upon as the Vietnam War or World War II. MASH, on the other hand, I've gone on record as not liking at all. I dislike this movie. It's come up a lot recently on the channel when I'm doing my list reactions and things of that nature. I don't like MASH. The Patriot's going to win, though I'm not a huge fan of The Patriot either, so we'll see if it goes too much further. Okay, A Hidden Life versus Pearl Harbor. This is a gimme. It's A Hidden Life. Come on, Pearl Harbor, not going to the next round. Okay, Bullet in the Head versus The Windtalkers. Ooh, what a coincidence. We have the two John Woo movies up first here. John Woo only made these two war movies. Actually, he has his Red Cliff movies, which I guess are war movies. I forget if I included those or not. I don't think I did. Bullet in the Head is easily the better movie. I'll talk about it more in other matchups. Windtalkers is not great. The action is pretty cool, but it's not a great movie overall. Next up is Defiance versus Last of the Mohicans. I just talked about The Last of the Mohicans on my Michael Mann tier list. Defiance is World War II. Defiance is interesting, but I think it's a little middle of the road. It's a little samey, a little familiar feeling to a lot of other World War II movies. I think for being more distinct and a little more original, I think I'm going to go Last of the Mohicans. Oh, here's Wolf Warrior 2. Yep. As I just said, I don't really like Wolf Warrior 2 all that much. Gone with the Wind is looking at the Civil War, and it doesn't have a very good perspective on the Civil War, but it's a much better movie than Wolf Warrior 2. But I'm going with the Wind here. Okay, next up, Deer Hunter versus Act of Valor. This is easily the Deer Hunter. The Deer Hunter is going to make a deep run here, if I'm being honest. I don't know if it'll go all the way. Oh, and it's worth saying here, I have no idea what's going to win this. I have not sat and thought through these matchups. I mean, first off, they're randomly assigned, but I don't have an opinion on one war movie is definitely better than all the others. I think in the past I might have said that my favorite war movie is Tae Guk Gi, The Brotherhood of War. And I definitely want people to see that because it's an underrated one. That movie will be making a deep run as well. The Deer Hunter, definitely going to be making a deep run here, I think. Act of Valor is, the only interesting thing about that movie is that it's, the cast are real Navy SEALs firing like real ammunition. So it has that like unique quality to it. It's not a good movie though, whereas Deer Hunter is phenomenal. Okay, The Pianist versus Red Dawn. The Pianist is, I guess you could say, more of a Holocaust movie than a war movie because like it doesn't really show the war at all. It shows the effects of the war and the effects of the Holocaust during World War II. The Pianist is a fantastic movie. I think I hadn't watched it when I did my Best Picture winners tier list, or maybe I had by then, but I hadn't when I did my like IMDb Top 250 or whatever. The Pianist is a really excellent movie. It's much better than Red Dawn, which I don't think is a very good movie. I don't think either version of Red Dawn is very good. The original Red Dawn is better than that crappy remake they did, but the original is not that good either. 1917 versus Come and See. I don't dislike 1917. I think the one take is kind of gimmicky, but it does add a little something to the movie. Whereas Come and See is going to make a deep run. Come and See versus the Deer Hunters are going to be a tough matchup. Come and See might take the whole thing. I don't know. Come and See is powerful. Okay, R Point versus All Quiet on the Western Front. I've seen both versions of All Quiet on the Western Front. I saw the original version, the 1930 version, back in school like a long time ago. I don't remember it all that well. I watched the new version recently because it only came out recently, and I was blown away. It far surpassed my expectations, and I thought it was phenomenal. It conveys the familiar anti-war sentiment much better than many other war movies. And this one is also, it's looking at World War I, which is worth pointing out. So was 1917. They're set in the same year. Well, actually, All Quiet on the Western Front is 1917 and 1918, I think. Good Morning Vietnam versus The Great Escape. Good Morning Vietnam is good, but The Great Escape is one of my favorite movies ever made. The Great Escape, and here's another one that's going to make a deep run. The Great Escape is often the movie that I say as my like favorite movie of all time when I'm pressed to name just one, which I don't know that I have like one necessarily. But The Great Escape is up there for like my absolute favorite movies of all time. Just like The Pianist, it's less about the war itself and more about like an aspect of the war. In this case, it's about POWs, prisoners of war during World War II. Okay, Free State of Jones versus Hacksaw Ridge. This is interesting because I don't like either of these very much. It's pretty easy. Hacksaw Ridge is definitely the better movie. I don't like Hacksaw Ridge all that much though. It's too Jesus-y. I think the first half of that movie is like straight up bad. The second half is better. Like the battle scenes are well executed. Free State of Jones, I think, is just actually kind of bad. Dunkirk versus The Hurt Locker. I think both of these movies are pretty good. I don't love either of them. I think I would go Dunkirk. I think Dunkirk's the better of the two. I talked about Dunkirk on my Christopher Nolan tier list, and I talked about The Hurt Locker on my Catherine Bigelow tier list. So you can check out both of those videos to hear more thoughts on these two movies. Speaking of Catherine Bigelow, here's her other war movie, Zero Dark 30 versus Overlord. I'm in that tier list. I've gone on record saying, and in my Best Picture tier list, I think, unless it was only just nominated. I've gone on record. I don't really like Zero Dark 30. I don't really get the hype for it. I don't think it's all that great. I think it's okay. I don't think it's bad. I just think it's okay. It doesn't do much for me. Overlord, I don't love either, but it's a much more interesting and unique movie. This is like the Nazi zombie movie, kind of. It's more entertaining. Overlord's getting the win here, which this one's going to ruffle some feathers, probably. Okay, that's the left half of the bracket, but now we move to the right side of the bracket. We have Lawrence of Arabia versus The Veteran. Lawrence of Arabia, however, that's an all-timer. Okay, Born to Defense versus 12 Strong. Born to Defense is one of the more obscure movies on this list. It's also like only partially a war movie. It is a Jet Li movie. It's ostensibly a martial arts movie, but the opening is a war movie. He's a soldier at the start. And then it becomes like a boxing movie and stuff. It's a weird movie. Jet Li directed it, which I think it's the only movie he directed. Born to Defense, it's not great. It's a pretty messy one, actually. And it's only a little bit of a war movie. I don't imagine Born to Defense will go much further. But it's going to go past 12 Strong, because 12 Strong I do not like at all. 12 Strong, for a movie that's about like horse soldiers, which sounds interesting, 12 Strong is like the most generic war movie ever. 12 Strong, if you told me it was like written by AI, I'd believe you. It's just like a big old bundle of cliches and nothing interesting. Which is a shame because like, it has a good cast. Like Michael Shannon's in it. Michael Shannon's always great. But you put him in a movie this generic, he can't single-handedly make the movie good. Okay, Son of Saul versus Black Hawk Down. This is an interesting one. Black Hawk Down I like. It's one of I think it's one of Ridley Scott's better movies. It has quite a few problems, though. It's not like perfect. Son of Saul, on the other hand, again, just like The Pianist, it's more about the Holocaust than it is about the actual like war itself. But I mean, I'm considering that all one. I think it's still a war film because it's the effects of the war. It's what the war is about, you know. Specifically in Son of Saul, it's looking at like the showers in particular, like that side of it. Son of Saul is a really harrowing watch. It's extremely intense and bleak, and it pulls no punches. The best part about Son of Saul, the most like impressive part about it, is it has a unique visual aesthetic. It has this really restrained, really refined, really committed cinematography style where it is specifically like every shot is directly behind the main actor. And it's all like, it's not even over the shoulder, it's like behind him, or like his head is blocking it. And it's got a more kind of squarish aspect ratio. I don't think it's 4:3, I think it's some other specific square aspect ratio. And so you're really only seeing what's around him with like him in the way. It creates this sense of like claustrophobia and this sense of like, you're really locked into his perspective without actually being his like, through his eyes, through his POV. It's really interesting, and it's a really powerful, more like artsy approach to a World War II Holocaust kind of movie. It's really great. Son of Saul might go quite a bit further. Okay, next up is Behind Enemy Lines versus Forrest Gump. Now, Behind Enemy Lines isn't great. Forrest Gump is only partially a war movie. There's a pretty substantial part of the movie that is about the Vietnam War, but there's also a lot of other stuff in Forrest Gump that has nothing to do with it. Even still, I think even the brief Vietnam part of Forrest Gump is still better than anything in Behind Enemy Lines, so it's got to move on. Tae Guk Gi, The Brotherhood of War versus Glory. Now, I want to be clear, Glory is really good. It's a Civil War movie, a really great Denzel Washington performance. I think it was his like big like star-making role, his like Oscar role. Glory is really good. Tae Guk Gi, however, I think is criminally underrated. Tae Guk Gi is a great South Korean war movie. If you didn't know, there are two great World War II South Korean movies, and they're both from the same director. So his other movie is going to show up later on the list. It's called My Way. Tae Guk Gi is so good, so underrated. Two fantastic lead performances. The whole Brotherhood of War thing refers to, it's specifically about two brothers who end up being like forced to enlist and fight in the army, and then through this series of events that could seem far-fetched, but the movie makes it extremely believable, they end up fighting on like opposite sides of the war, like one for the North, one for the South. Just great character work, great performances, and phenomenal battle sequences. I think this might have the best battle sequences. Like for me, I think the Tae Guk Gi battle sequences, they impress me even a little bit more than like the Saving Private Ryan battle sequences. Like the D-Day landing in Saving Private Ryan is like unbelievably harrowing and intense. I think Tae Guk Gi, it's like that type of harrowing and like brutal and gritty, while also having a little bit more of an action-y flair to it, where like it's still intense and harrowing and brutal, while still exciting in a way where Saving Private Ryan isn't as much, though it still is a little bit. Like the sniper battle is really exciting, and it gets you a little bit of adrenaline in Saving Private Ryan as well. Anyway, I really love this movie. The only thing that holds it back for me is like there's some weak CGI, but that's like such a tiny little part of this movie. It doesn't overdo it. I love Tae Guk Gi. More people need to watch it. Okay, Inglourious Basterds versus First Blood. This is an interesting matchup. Inglourious Basterds is Tarantino's movie, of course. Revisionist history kind of war movie. First Blood is the first Rambo movie before Rambo was in the title. I think Rambo is going to be held back by the fact that it actually doesn't involve the war whatsoever. This first one is entirely about Rambo is returning home from the war and having trouble reintegrating to society and being judged by society and whatnot. So the war, we're seeing the effects of the war psychologically on this person, like with his PTSD and whatnot, but we're not seeing the war itself, except in like, tiny quick little flashes to like his torture, his imprisonment. It not showing the actual war is going to hold it back, and Inglourious Basterds is going to move forward. Inglourious Basterds is, is a great movie anyway. Okay, Apocalypse Now versus The Imitation Game. Apocalypse Now is, of course, a Vietnam War movie. For me, the two best Vietnam War movies are Apocalypse Now and The Deer Hunter. I don't know what's going to happen if those two come head to head. They're on opposite sides of the bracket, so they might not ever meet. They might not make it to the 2 finals. Who knows? But those are the top 2 Vietnam War movies for me. The Imitation Game is another one that's like interesting because it's outside the war. It's about the war, but it's about like the code breaking and whatnot. It's an interesting perspective on it. The Imitation Game, I feel like it's definitely a story worth telling, and it's good, but it's like artificially good. For me, The Imitation Game is like the pinnacle of the Oscar bait style, the like Academy standard style. The Imitation Game goes too far into the Academy standard Oscar baity style, where it feels like the movie doesn't have its own personality, where it feels like it's doing things to engineer an Oscar win rather than, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't have its own style, its own flair. It doesn't feel like there's passion there. I don't think it's bad by any stretch, but Apocalypse Now, that's an all-timer anyway. Okay, 71 versus The Bridge on the River Kwai. 71 is interesting. I don't love it. Honestly, I don't love The Bridge on the River Kwai either. I don't quite hold this in as high regard as a lot of people do. I know it's like a classic. It's like a big epic from David Lean, one of the masters of the epic. I don't love Bridge on the River Kwai. I think it's quite good. But I don't think it's like, I don't hold it as like one of the all-time greats like a lot of people do. But it's better than 71. Okay, Army of Shadows versus Beasts of No Nation. This is interesting. These are 2 kind of lesser talked about. Army of Shadows is about the French resistance, whereas Beasts of No Nation is about like child soldiers fighting in Africa. 2 very different movies, both very interesting, both good. I think Army of Shadows is the better movie. Quo Vadis Aida versus Adam Resurrected. This one is really interesting. Quo Vadis Aida is it's about the Bosnian genocide. So definitely a subject that is not touched on nearly as much in cinema, but a very important subject, and it handles the subject matter very well. It's a really great movie, great central performance as well from that lead actor who had to perform in like several different languages. Really impressive performance. Adam Resurrected is one I would guess a lot of people haven't seen. A lot of people don't like this movie too. Those who have seen it, it's got a pretty low like scores and like poor reviews and whatnot. I really liked it. This one has stuck with me in a way that a lot of movies don't. It's from Paul Schrader, both written and directed by Paul Schrader. I think he's adapting a book, so it's an adapted screenplay from Paul Schrader. Plus he's directing it. This one has some moments that are just like really hard to stomach and have really stuck with me. And it's also exceptionally weird. Jeff Goldblum is playing the lead role. It is like the Jeff Goldblumiest Jeff Goldblum performance. Like it's him at 11 with all his eccentricities on display. There are these beautiful little moments where like for no reason he'll just like do a little tap dance jig and like strike a pose and he just kind of holds that pose and the scene just ends. It's very weird. I really like it, and I think more people should see it. So I'm going to give it the win here. Both movies are really good, though. Okay, My Way versus Jojo Rabbit. Everyone knows Jojo Rabbit. That's the Taika Waititi. Lots of comedy, very funny. It's got that one huge gut punch moment with the mother's shoes hanging. I did a video essay about that scene for Studio Binder. I don't think I've talked about it on this channel, though. That moment is incredible. The overall movie around it, I don't think lives up to that moment. I think the rest of the movie is a little weaker by comparison, though there is still plenty of funny stuff throughout. I think it's honestly it feels like a little too Wes Anderson-y to not be a Wes Anderson movie. Like, Taika Waititi has had his own directorial voice in other movies, and this one it felt like less like him and more like Wes Anderson. Like with some of the wardrobes and stuff too, because like the Hitler Youth uniform and like the visuals of like the tents and stuff is just like very similar to the Moonrise Kingdom Boy Scout uniforms. It's obviously not the same thing, but My Way is the other great South Korean war movie. It tells the crazy story of how 2 South Korean men wound up wearing German soldiers' uniforms, where how they ended up like fighting for like every different army in the different theaters of war. Like they fought for like the Russian army and blah blah blah. They like moved around, and it has this interesting message of like it doesn't matter what uniform you wear. It's always like the same warfare. It's always the same hardship. You know, there's something interesting going on there. It's really good. I don't like it quite as much as Tae Guk Gi, but it's still excellent. Like it's really great performances again, and really great battle sequences again. Also, they feel impressively different despite being from the same director and having similar, like, you know, two lead characters who were like close and torn apart and stuff like that. Full Metal, wow, another weird coincidence, just like the John Woo. We've now matched up to two Kubrick movies, coincidentally. Full Metal Jacket versus Dr. Strangelove. These are two great movies. I think if I was just picking my favorite movie, I would go Dr. Strangelove. But it is less of a war movie, which I will factor in here. Full Metal Jacket is the more thorough war movie. Platoon versus Land of Mine, as I talked about in, I think, my Best Picture winners tier list, or maybe some other video on this channel. I don't love Platoon. Platoon doesn't do that much for me, honestly. I think it's very on the nose, and I feel like it's just not that interesting of a story. Whereas Land of Mine is really good. Land of Mine is a Danish movie. It's again looking at World War II, but the Danish perspective on that is definitely lesser explored. And it's specifically looking at the way that after the war ended, there were all these landmines buried all over the place. And it's looking at the subject, which is something a lot of people don't ever think about. I had never thought about it, of like, people have to go dig up those landmines. Like, there are just these landmines buried all over the country, which makes for lots of very tense scenes where like soldiers are being forced to very carefully like dig with their hands in the sand to dig up all these landmines. It's a very unique perspective on the war and like the ending of the war. I completely forgot that I put The King's Man in this ranking. It is a war movie though. I think it's World War I that it's looking at. I did not like The King's Man at all. This one, I forgot about it as soon as it ended. You know, it was that kind of movie. I don't understand why they made this movie, and especially why they made it this way. Like, who wanted this? Who is this for? Like, I liked the first Kingsman movie a lot. I really did not like the second one. And this one I'm just baffled by. Like, why did they make it this way? Who wanted to see an origin story for the Kingsman, like, organization? And especially, who wanted it to be this, like, dour and looking at, like, this heavy subject? The first two are tonally aligned to being, like, goofy and crass and comedic. This one is trying to be, like, heart-wrenching and serious about, like, prisoners of war and like all kinds of like real world death. Just seems so misguided. The Wall is going to win this one by virtue of not being anywhere near as bad as Kingsman. Just to be clear, there are a few movies called The Wall. This is not that like Matt Damon, you know, Great Wall of China movie. It's not that. This is The Wall, the one that's about a sniper. It's Aaron Taylor Johnson as a sniper hiding behind a like crumbling wall as an unseen enemy sniper. He's like battling with him. Really cool concept. I don't think it's executed all that well, but cool concept. And it's better than The King's Man, so it's moving on this first round. Okay, The Big Red One versus Atonement. Atonement is best known for that one really impressive tracking shot. And that is a supremely impressive tracking shot. The coordination involved is incredible. It's a case where like they did it that way because it was actually easier and cheaper to do it that way and like faster. So it's a case where like something looks incredibly impressive, but it's actually the easier way to do it, which if you look into it is actually often the case with some of these really impressive long takes, like that unbelievably impressive long take in Hard Boiled. They just did that to save time. You know, like the coordination is impressive as hell, but it's also a way to like make the shoot easier, not harder. Anyway, that doesn't really like matter. It's impressive as hell regardless. The movie around Atonement, I don't really care about all that much. Like I don't get too invested in the characters. I don't find it all that memorable. The Big Red One is going to win here. The Big Red One is a solid movie. And our last matchup in the first round is The Woman King versus Schindler's List. Very lopsided. Schindler's List is going to win. I didn't like The Woman King very much. I had high hopes for it. It felt like it was butchered by the studio, was the impression I got. It felt very Marvel-y, despite being a movie that should not have that style. The style of it didn't work. Yeah, it felt like a corporate product, and that really rubs me the wrong way, the movie. And Schindler's List is a powerful piece of work. Okay, moving on to round two. That was the first round. That was all the movies. These next matchups are going to get tougher as we move along. Okay, so fucking real tough right off the bat here. Barry Lyndon versus Saving Private Ryan. This is the first one where I have to like really stop and think. The matchups have been like relatively easy thus far. These are so different that it's hard to compare the two. I would say I could use like which one's more of a war movie to like as like the tiebreaker, because like Saving Private Ryan is all about the war, whereas Barry Lyndon's only like half about war, maybe even less than half about the war. If I was just picking like which is the better movie overall, I'm not even sure. I think I'd go Barry Lyndon for best overall movie. I'd go Barry Lyndon for best overall movie. For best war movie, I think I have to go Saving Private Ryan. Okay, Tropic Thunder versus The Patriot. I don't like The Patriot all that much, but I do have to say, Tropic Thunder, it's about fake war. I don't think I can go too much further. The Patriot is getting lucky in these first 2 rounds, let's say. Okay, Hidden Life versus a Bullet in the Head, or just Bullet in the Head, actually. Bullet to the Head, by the way, is a different movie. Sylvester Stallone, like an action movie. It's not that. This is a John Woo movie. One of his lesser seen movies. It's like a surprise war movie. It doesn't seem like it would be a war movie at all, because it isn't in part. It's really a movie about friendship, and then it like becomes a Vietnam War movie partway through. And it's like really intense when it becomes a Vietnam War movie. And it's really interesting to see how John Woo presents the Vietnam War, like outside of the Wind Talkers. Like that's into a war movie too, which we saw in the first round. Bullet in the Head, however, is much, much better than Wind Talkers. It's not like a little bit better, it's much better. Bullet in the Head is honestly one of my favorite John Woo movies. It's not quite at the level of Hard Boiled and The Killer, but it's right at the level, right below that. The action is really good. Even when it's like the battle sequences, when they're like fighting in Vietnam, the action is still so like exciting while also being really intense. I think most people would go a Hidden Life. Also, most people probably haven't seen a Bullet in the Head because it's one of the more obscure ones, I guess. I definitely prefer Bullet in the Head. Last of the Mohicans versus Gone with the Wind. It's going to be Gone with the Wind. Moving on. That's an easy one. Deer Hunter versus The Pianist. This is like kind of a tough one in theory, but not really. It's pretty easily The Deer Hunter for me. The Deer Hunter is an all-timer. I mean, The Pianist maybe is too. The Pianist is really, really good. Deer Hunter shows more of the actual war, which is important, but also has a lot of stuff away from the war, whereas The Pianist is very thoroughly grounded in like the Holocaust from start to finish. So I think those about cancel each other out. I think The Deer Hunter is just so good. It has to be The Deer Hunter moving forward. Come and See versus All Quiet on the Western Front. The best war movies are usually anti-war movies. Both of these are great at being anti-war movies. That is the sentiment that both of these are really hammering on, the anti-war messaging. A lot of war movies have that message, but they kind of like still indulge in the like oorah stuff of warfare, These two are very thoroughly like, it's harrowing, it's bleak, it's depressing, it's heartbreaking. Both of these movies. Come and See more so. Come and See is going to move on. I will say, just before I eliminate it, I want to sing the praises of, I would say I was especially impressed by the way that All Quiet on the Western Front depicted hunger as a constant in these soldiers' lives. The way that like hunger is like the thing that they're most focused on. When they're not being actively shot at, it's finding food to not starve to death. I feel like that is a really interesting aspect of warfare where it feels like apocalyptic, where they're just struggling for like the basic necessities. A lot of movies don't show that necessarily. That I think really elevates All Quiet on the Western Front. The other thing that I think really elevates it is something that is brand new to this version of the movie. Like it wasn't in the old adaptation and it's not in the book either. There's this kind of like they cut back and forth between the warfare with this like main squad of soldiers and the like political side of the warfare, the like generals and the the higher ups who are negotiating the end of the war. I loved how those scenes were done. I feel like that is what made me go from thinking the movie was great to like loving it, is that kind of subplot, that like parallel subplot of the war being negotiated, because it just so perfectly hammers home the point of how pointless it all is, which is like the best way to encapsulate the anti-war sentiment. It's shown that like they could have ended the war so much earlier, but it's like the egos of these higher ups who like aren't fighting in the war themselves. They don't care about the lives of the soldiers who are fighting on the front line. They just keep the war going for these like petty reasons. And even when they do sign the armistice, the ceasefire later on, instead of ending it immediately, they do that stupid ceremonial thing of it being like, we're going to end it on the 11th day of the 11th month at 11 a.m. of the year or whatever. And it's like, what the fuck is the point of that? You're just allowing more time for bloodshed that is so needless. Like you're already agreeing to end the war, yet you are allowing hours more of bloodshed that didn't need to happen. And I get, there's this like tactical side of it and the idea of like word needs to reach the front line, but I kind of think that's BS, honestly. And then one of the most heartbreaking scenes of that whole thing is when he's, the soldiers all think they're headed home, and then the German general, Friedrichs, is like, No, I'm going to send you back out there in the final 15 minutes for one last push, purely for the sake of his ego. I think all that stuff's really great. I just wanted to send this movie's praises before I eliminated from the tournament because I think it's really good. Anyway, okay, I got to move a little quicker here because it's going to take me forever to get through these. Great Escape vs. Hacksaw Ridge, no contest whatsoever. It's the Great Escape moving forward. Okay, Dunkirk versus Overlord. It's going to be Dunkirk. I think I have a reputation as a Nolan hater on this channel. I don't hate Nolan. I don't think his movies are quite as good as a lot of people think, but they're always good, and Dunkirk is better than Overlord easily. Dunkirk is a good movie. Lawrence of Arabia versus Born to Defense. This is a pretty lopsided one. Born to Defense was lucky to get through that first round. It's Lawrence of Arabia. Son of Saul versus Forrest Gump. Another easy one. It's Son of Saul moving forward. Tae Guk Gi versus Inglourious Bastards. I like Inglourious Bastards a lot. And I'm a big, Tarantino fan. He's a very important filmmaker to me. But it's got to be Tae Guk Gi, if I'm being honest. Tae Guk Gi, it's moving forward. Apocalypse Now is easily moving forward. I think for a lot of people, this would be a tough matchup. It's not tough for me. Like I said in the previous round, Bridge on the River Kwai doesn't fire on all cylinders for me in the way that it does for a lot of people. I want to be clear, I think it's good. I think it's really good. It just isn't like an all-timer for me. Army of Shadows versus Adam Resurrected. These are two kind of weirder ones. I want people to see Adam Resurrected because I consider it extremely underrated. I might make a video about Adam Resurrected at some point because I feel like there's a lot to talk about with that movie. It doesn't get talked about at all. But I don't think I can in good conscience move it forward when it's up against Army of Shadows. So Army of Shadows moving on. Okay, next up is My Way versus Full Metal Jacket. Definitely got to ruffle some feathers here with the Kubrick lovers. I think the first half of Full Metal Jacket, the training camp sequence is fantastic. I think the actual sequence in the war is a little weaker. I don't think it's bad. I actually want to rewatch Full Metal Jacket because it's been a very long time since I watched it. But I definitely think the first half is stronger, whereas this might be crazy. I might be ruffling some feathers here. I am going to go My Way. I'm moving both South Korean movies on past the next round here. Okay, Land of Mine versus The Wall. It's Land of Mine. The Wall was lucky to get through that first round when it was up against The King's Man. Okay, The Big Red One versus Schindler's List. I think it's going to be Schindler's List moving forward. Okay, on to the semifinals, I think this is. Or is this quarterfinals? Quarterfinals, I think. Okay, Saving Private Ryan versus Patriot. Another easy matchup. I think this might be the last easy matchup. Saving Private Ryan is moving forward. I think Saving Private Ryan would be a lot of people's number one. It's often number one on rankings. If you look at if you Google, top 10 war movies, Saving Private Ryan's usually number one. I don't think it's number one for me, but let's see what happens because it's moving forward pretty easily so far. Okay, Bullet in the Head versus Gone with the Wind. Both of these aren't explicitly about the war. They both kind of use the war more as a backdrop or a setting and as a way to define character. I think Bullet in the Head is maybe a little bit more about the war than Gone with the Wind. Also, it has a better opinion on the war than Gone with the Wind does, which is very pro-Confederacy. Not that it's I don't know. I don't want that to clearly invalidate what Gone with the Wind's doing. That one particular shot in Gone with the Wind, you know the shot I'm talking about, the shot where it pulls back really far and you just see the endless field of dead and wounded from the Civil War. That's a really impressive shot, and it says a lot about the war, about the bloodshed and the lives lost and all that. Bullet in the Head, I think, now the war does affect the Gone with the Wind characters, but I think it might affect the characters more in Bullet in the Head because Bullet in the Head deals a lot, very heavily with PTSD and this loss of self, this and also what the title refers to is a man who got shot in the head and didn't die, one of the main characters. He's shot in the head and he has permanent brain damage. He's left brain damaged forever. I think he loses his ability to speak. He has no memory. He can't function. He winds up living on the streets, can't hold down a job. It's really heavy. It's surprisingly emotional. It's effectively emotional. And Bullet in the Head is also I feel John Woo is underrated for the way that he presents friendship. I think he's really great at that in the way that a friendship between people who are on opposed sides. And I feel it's really the second half of Bullet in the Head where it really sings And it's so emotional the way that he's like, it's really over the top and kind of cheesy, but it is effectively emotional when he's like cross-cutting between the early days of their friendship where they're like riding their bikes together and all laughing and smiling and stuff, where they are at the end where they're now like shooting at each other and one of their friends is dead and the other two are mortal enemies. It's a really good story and a good trajectory. It's cheesy, but I think it's really good. I'm going to move Bullet in the Head forward. This is a pretty tough decision, but it's moving on. Oh my God damn it. Okay, this is really difficult. Oh man. Deer Hunter versus Come and See. If anyone's like just listening to the audio, I'm saying it out loud. Because, you know, if anyone, by the way, I don't mind at all if you just listen to the audio of these, if you want to like have me on in a tab while you work on something else or play a video game or whatever, that is A-okay with me. I do that all the time with YouTube videos. That's A-okay with me. If you want to treat this like a podcast, go for it. The Deer Hunter versus Come and See is the matchup that I am really dreading. This is really tough for me. Maybe even tougher for me than a lot of people because personally I adore both of these movies. I would say beyond like just looking at war movies, I consider these two of the best movies ever made, full stop. And they're so different, which is cool. Like they're looking at completely different parts of it. You know, Deer Hunter is about PTSD. Come and See is probably the most effective anti-war messaging out of any war movie or any anti-war movie. Oh, this is so tough. This is so tough. I could see a world where this is the final matchup. Like I could see these being the last two movies in the bracket. Oh man, I think I'm gonna skip this one and do the other ones in this round, and then I'll come back and do it because I think the other ones will be easier. Like yeah, Great Escape versus Dunkirk. It's Great Escape easily. Oh man, and then whichever one wins out of these two is gonna have to go get the Great Escape next. That's gonna be very tough as well. Oh man. Okay, let me do the other side of the bracket first. We have a couple matchups here. Lawrence of Arabia versus Son of Saul. You know, this is weirdly a tough matchup. I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be, but it kind of is. I think it's got to be Lawrence of Arabia because of that epic scope. Also, it's showing more of like the actual war. This is David Lean's masterpiece for sure. I've honestly been a little disappointed by... I've been going through David Lean's other movies recently, and none of them are living up to Lawrence of Arabia, which like I wasn't expecting them to necessarily be that good, but like... So far, they're not even coming close. The other ones of his that I've seen. Son of Saul's really good. I'm glad Son of Saul made it this far, but Lawrence of Arabia has to be what moves forward. Okay, Tae Guk Gi versus Apocalypse Now. Oh man. I think this is an easy Apocalypse Now for most people. And I do think that like Apocalypse Now is one of the best movies ever made. I think I'm going to factor out my personal bias here, and I'm going to go with Apocalypse Now. And I do firmly believe it's one of the best movies ever made. I think it was like personal preference, like which one I would rather watch on a random evening. I would probably, like I've watched Tae Guk Gi more times. And I've watched Apocalypse Now a bunch of times. I've watched Apocalypse Now like 5 times, which shows you how many times I've watched Tae Guk Gi. The movie is so rewatchable, so enjoyable. I gotta go Apocalypse Now. It is objectively the better and the more important movie. Okay, Army of Shadows versus My Way. My Way is the other South Korean movie. I think Tae Guk Gi is the better of the 2 South Korean war movies in here from that same director. But they might both be better than Army of Shadows. Army of Shadows is great. Now, when I say they might be better than it, I mean they might both move past it here. I think Army of Shadows, again, if I'm canceling out bias, I think Army of Shadows is the better movie. But it doesn't really show the war at all. It's showing the French resistance. And it's taking a little bit of an abstract approach to it. I think for best war movie, My Way is you're very much in the war. You're in the trenches. You're in the heat of the battle. I think for the war tournament, My Way is moving on. Land of Mine versus Schindler's List. It's got to be Schindler's List. Now I got to come back to Deer Hunter versus Come and See. This is so difficult for me. Okay, my gut is telling me Come and See. I think I have to go Come and See. Man, that's tough though. Very, very tough. Come and See is moving on. And I am really not looking forward to this next matchup. But okay, Saving Private Ryan versus Bullet in the Head. Bullet in the Head had a great run, but Saving Private Ryan is going to move forward. Okay, just like before, I'm gonna save this one for afterwards because that's the tougher matchup here. Lawrence of Arabia versus Apocalypse Now. It is Apocalypse Now. For me, this is an easier matchup than Tae Guk Gi versus it because I have more personal bias towards Tae Guk Gi. My Way versus Schindler's List. It's going to be Schindler's List moving forward. We have 2 Spielberg movies moving on to the finals or semifinals or whatever, which is interesting because I'm not like the biggest Spielberg fan, but his highs are really, really high. And I do think these are 2 of his, best movies. Okay, Come and See versus The Great Escape. Now, this is really tough for me because I've often considered The Great Escape like my favorite movie, if I had to pick a single favorite movie. Now, and I do rotate, like sometimes I'll say something else, sometimes I'll say whatever. If we're talking which is the better movie, I might still say The Great Escape. But I might say Come and See. I think I have more of a personal connection to The Great Escape because I saw it when I was younger. I definitely have some nostalgia attached to it. I think, or at least I'd like to believe that I'm pretty good about factoring out nostalgia when I look at movies. I don't think I'm like completely immune to nostalgia, but I do think I'm not as affected by it as a lot of people are. Like a lot of people I think are blinded by nostalgia. The Great Escape is like a comfort movie for me, as odd as it sounds. It's being like super long movie. I love how long it is. I'm invested in every second. I love these characters so much. I need to talk more about the Great Escape. I think I need to do a whole dedicated video to it. I've kind of resisted because it's one of those movies that I love so much that it's hard for me to like talk about in a coherent way. Whereas Come and See, I only saw for the first time relatively recently, like within the last year or 2, I think. But it's such a powerhouse. I think for war film, if we're talking best overall movie, I might go Great Escape. I might go Come and See. Best war film, The Great Escape's like too far removed from the war. I think it's more about the POWs, the prisoners of war. Whereas Come and See, you're in the thick of it. And you're in the thick of it from a perspective that isn't often shown. It is so harrowing, so heavy, so bleak, so affecting. It's got to be Come and See, I think. It pains me. It is physically painful for me to eliminate The Great Escape, but I think Come and See has to move forward. Someone's got to tell me in the comments, is this the finals, or is this the finals and this is the semifinals? I need to know. Someone tell me. Someone let me know in the comments, please, so I can say this in the future, so I can say it correctly. Okay, Saving Private Ryan versus Come and See. Now, like I said earlier, Saving Private Ryan is where the tops a lot of these lists. Like if you look at the best list or whatever. For me, it's easily Come and See. And I will say, like retroactively, had the pairings shook up differently, The Great Escape would have beaten Saving Private Ryan too. The Deer Hunter would have beaten Saving Private Ryan too. So both The Deer Hunter and The Great Escape, I think, are a more worthy final matchup against Come and See than Saving Private Ryan and Come and See. Just for the record. That's part of what the random or ordering does to the list, though. Okay, Apocalypse Now versus Schindler's List. I think the amount that it's about the war is going to be the tiebreaker here. I think we're going to go Apocalypse Now. And then when it comes to Apocalypse Now versus Come and See, this is a tough matchup, but I don't think it's as tough as Come and See versus The Great Escape, or as tough as Come and See versus The Deer Hunter. Again, I think either of those could have been like the actual final matchup. It's Come and See. Come and See is winning, which I'm happy about. I didn't know if that would be the case when I started. When I went into this, I wasn't sure if it would be. I think the top 3 for me that I was resisting thinking about was Come and See, The Deer Hunter, and The Great Escape. And Come and See had to dethrone all of those to get to its win. And in Apocalypse Now is a very worthy second place here. So there we have it. Come and See is the official winner of the Brickwall Pictures 2022 Best War Film Ever Made single-elimination tournament. I covered all the big war movies in here. There are maybe some omissions like Flags of Our Fathers. I've never seen that one. I don't know if that would be in the running. I doubt it would make it all the way, but who knows. I've never seen Letters from Iwo Jima, for example. So there are a few I haven't seen, but I got most of the big ones in here. Come and See is the champion. If you've never seen Come and See before, I do highly recommend it, but I will say, buckle up. It is a heavy watch. The reason why I only saw it recently, it's been on my radar for a while, but I knew this was such a heavy watch. I wanted to make sure I was in the perfect mindset to watch it. I wanted to make an event out of it too, clear my whole schedule to just digest this one big heavy movie. And I think that's the ideal way to watch it, if you can, engineer that circumstance to watch it. Thanks for watching. You can check out my other tournaments in this playlist that are here on screen. You can subscribe if you like stuff like this. I do tournaments, tier lists, video essays, all kinds of stuff. I'll see you next time, and I'll see you in the trenches, comrade.